Welcome to DWBIADDA channel. Please subscribe for latest training videos.
Hello to you all. Today we are going to talk about plans and monthly activities. Let's open them. And here we are at the layout of the monthly activity. As you can see, we have text view, button, recycler view, and then some kind of statistic. So let's review code for monthly activity. As usual, we have some defined objects and we have function initialize. After that we have our button earnings, and by clicking on that button we open show pop-up invested function. Also we have read database function. So let's review show pop-up invested first. As you can see, we have usual part about pop-ups, then have some text view changes and applying font. After that we have on button confirm, that's our button on pop-up, and if we click on that button we are checking if our edit texts are now empty, and if that's true we are collecting text from them. After that we call function write database and pass two parameters, pop-up text and pop-up money. Let's review that function. Write database is this function here. As you can see, we are locating ourselves in database, the child monthly plus number plus child money, and then set value p. That's pop-up money. Here in the second line we have the same story, but we are just setting value for the text, and that's this here value string, that's pop-up text. In the initialize function, as you see, we located ourselves with database references to the child monthly. Now let's get to read database function. There it is. As you can see, we have simple reading data from database. We have again variable n, where we store how many children do we have in monthly, -1, because that's earnings child which we have in our database. Then we have two arrays which are being initialized here, prices and items, and then we have earnings, and we are collecting earnings from our database. That child earnings is the child which we diminish from our get children count here. Also our spendings are set to 0. Then we go through for loop and we fill our arrays prices and items, and as you can see we read it like usually, and then spendings, we add prices every time to our spendings variable so we can collect total spendings. Then we have layout manager and recycler view, and we create our recycler view there. We have also function add to text views, and that function is that here, where we add data from database. We add spendings to TV spendings, earnings to TV earnings, and balance to TV balance. Balance is earnings minus spendings, logically. And that would be it for this monthly activity. This activity is very simple, and as you can see, clean code. So let's get to plans activity. Here we are at the plans screen, simple screen with one text view, two buttons, and one text view here. Here is hidden an animation, design animation, but we'll talk about design animations in some other video. Let's go and review the code. We have function initialize as usually. Let's see that function. Here it is. We initialize our data and our user Firebase variable. After that we have our button home, and we locate our database references to the home, in button business to business, and in button taxes to taxes. And we have function read and parse data database references. So database references is named DB, so we'll use DB now in this function. We have db.add value event listener, and then we have reading. If data snapshot has child plans, so if we have plans for that category, then we read its value from database. Otherwise, we say you don't have any plans and our string text get that value. Then we have open, and that's the boolean variable which says if that category plans are showed. Then we have function slide down, and we set open to true, and slide up and set open to false. These slide down and slide up functions are functions which are connected to animations, and I'll, as I said, talk about that in some other tutorial. Now when we finish story about plans and monthly activities, let's go and make an intro to the graph. We'll talk about graph implementation, and in this case, if you want to use graph, you need to implement some library because Android Studio doesn't have any implemented graphs in his design objects. So I'm using the most used graph, I think it's JoJo64's graph view, and graph view is a library for Android to programmatically create flexible and nice looking diagrams. It's easy to understand, to integrate and to customize this graph view. So let's talk about implementing this graph view. As I said, we need to implement some library, and as we learned in previous tutorials, we implement our libraries in build-gradle.module-app and then in dependencies. You can go to the GitHub and find JoJo64 graph view, and then you'll find something like this. Pattern is the same. So when you go there, this code will be there, and here is how I implemented JoJo64's graph view. After typing this, you'll have to sync your project with Gradle files, and you implemented JoJo64's graph view. On GitHub, you can find many implemented functions in JoJo's graph view and see the source code of that graph. Also, you can create your own functions and try to be creative with that graph. So now let's just go to the quick review of graph activity. Here is my layout for graph fragment. As you can see, we have implemented this graph, and as you can see, we don't have any icon for graph here, it's question mark. We have some text views here, but they are for filters about graph, and we'll talk about that in next tutorial. Now let's just review this code. Here it is how we call our graph view, and then the name of it. It's like for any other design object. We have initialization of our graph. As you can see, it's very simple. It's name, then equals, and then which design object do we have? We have graph view, and then view because we are at the fragment. We learned that, and just find it on our layout. It's very simple. We have some functions about graph. We have add to graph function to add data to our graph. We have delete series to delete some series in the graph. We have function where we call our delete series function, and then we have function where we call our add to graph function. It's not so complex to manipulate with the graph, you'll see. Let's say a few words so we can learn something about graph theory. Graph view is a custom view that can be used to plot diagrams in your Android app. Because it extends the base view class of Android, we can use it like any other view in our layout. We can create simple graphs completely declarative in the layout XML file, or create more complex graphs programmatically in our Java code. The series class is used to fill the graph with data. One series contains the data points of one line that will be plotted as a line, points or bars. So we can choose between line, points and bars. We can choose what we want to display in our graph. Simple graphs only have one series, but we can have as much series as we want in our graph. We can choose a subclass of series in order to define the type of our graph. So as I said, line graph, points graph series or bar graph series. Then we have the viewport. The viewport defines the part that is currently visible. By default, the viewport signs automatically with the data so that the whole data can be plotted. It also will define nice looking bounds so that the minimum or maximum levels have rounded numbers. It is possible to have a large set of data, but we only want to show a part of it, so we can specifically add a fixed size to the viewport that is visible. We can also scroll through our graph horizontally and vertically, and we can zoom or scale our graph. And at the end of this part we have grid label renderer, and the grid label renderer is responsible for the generation of the vertical and horizontal labels and the new grid lines, and we can change the count of the levels, color, and so many options. So that would be some theoretical part about graph view. It's important to know this because if you just go to code without any explanations, you'll get stuck at some point in the next tutorial. So this was a good intro, I think, and I hope that you understood everything in the next video. Until then, thank you and goodbye.